First step will be the first barge maneuvering to the vicinity of the wreck, which should start tomorrow, and we expect that by tomorrow evening the first barge will be secured alongside the wreck. And from there they'll be doing a number of checks on board the vessel. One of the things that they need to do is to move the crane from the actual ship's crane over the cargo hold, manipulate the boom arm so that they have easy access onto the cargo hold hatch. The next step will be making sure that they can open that cargo hatch, and from there they'll carry on doing a number of tests before they actually start the process of cargo removal.
So is it possible that if the removal of the cargo is perhaps more complicated than initially envisaged, or tests show something of concern, that the deadline of the 30th of May might not be met?
For every phase that we are reaching, we have a number of contingencies in place. So, for example, one of the complications may be that we cannot use the crane system on board the vessel to actually maneuver the crane boom out of the way. Mm-hmm. We've already factored that, and we have a number of different plans for that.
How much oil remains on board the vessel at this point?
As we've said throughout, it's very difficult to estimate how much oil remains on board. What we do know is that there is no pumpable oil quantities remaining on board. What we've been doing, especially in the period in the run-up to the Christmas break, was getting divers inside the hull and sucking out little pockets of where the oil was concentrating on the way out of the hull. That continues. We have diver teams attending the vessel on a periodic basis. As we start making progress, and hopefully once we remove the cargo on cargo hold number 2, we will have better access to the fuel oil tanks, which are situated below the cargo hold, and we can then determine with a greater degree of accuracy what the situation is at that position.
In December, at the same point that you announced that divers will be collecting those oil pockets, 3,000 litres of oil was also removed. That's quite a sizable amount. So is it correct to say you have no sense of how much would be on board? Is it possible we could see an amount that high again?
I mean, I think I touched on this on one of the interviews with your colleagues. One of the biggest issues is when we're talking about very sizable fuel tanks. A fuel tank... fuel tanks number 1 is made up of 4 fuel tanks. Each of those 4 fuel tanks has a capacity for 250,000 litres of fuel. If you then look at those fuel tanks having residues, and just 1% of the total capacity being the residue which could be in those tanks, then it gives you a very rough estimation of the total quantities that we could be talking about. Remember that because we're unable to reach those tanks, we do not know how many of those 4 fuel tanks have been damaged, have been leaking, whether it's all 4 of them, just one of them. But I think the critical takeaway here is the fact that the situation in terms of oil escaping from the vessel is very well under control. We have a secondary containment system around the vessel anyway, so even if anything escapes from our primary containment, which is the area within the vessel, we then have a secondary containment layer to mitigate that, and we also have assets tasked to do periodic surveys and attendance, so that if anything were to escape even our secondary containment, we could deal with it.
Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't be able to rule out the risk of a further oil spill?
No.